I turned off comments from my previous video regarding the important question because the point was to leave people with deep thought and not to miss the point of the said question. Thank you to those who did comment. Your comments are still there in the event commenting is open again. Thank you for your understanding, and no, it is nothing personal. Also, I am slowly making older select videos public again.
Hello, today is October 27, 2020, and the time is 11:19 a.m. This video I'm going to talk about something tying it into a previous video when I talk about history being rewritten, erased, etc., and our repeating history, the cycles of civilization. And then that's going to segue into another topic about words and phrases people use constantly. With regards to history, secular scholars even say that there's anywhere from 200 to 1,000 years of history missing. And what is known as history appears it doesn't even make any sense in the timelines, which is interesting because a lot of people are relying, for example, on calendars and trying to, for example, say, well, prophecies, this and that, and this was said 1,000 years ago, and trying to make all these predictions based on calendars and the tool that measures change, time. And the problem is, with 2,000 to 1,000 years of missing history, we don't even know the real date of anything. And for people who don't know, I'm sure a lot of you do know this, that our calendar is based on BC, before Christ, and AD, after Christ's death. And this is where the modern calendars, that's what it's based on. But if we're missing that much of time in the calendars, then we don't even know when we are, if that makes any sense. So that's something to consider, and this is something that you can look into yourself. I can produce, examples and studies and everything else, and all that does is give people who don't want to accept it for whatever reason an opportunity to try to dissect it. But if you search this out on your own and you uncover this yourself, then it's on you what you do, for example, accept it or not. Now, this little next part that I'm going to tangent off of kind of ties in with missing history, and it has to do with the population numbers. And we have official population numbers of the whole world, and, for example, countries and everything else. What's really interesting is, and I knew about this 10, 15 years ago, where people, I guess, with too much time on their hands, sat down and started calculating numbers of towns and cities and everything else, and considering the fact that, numbers will be off and populations not registered anywhere. So they concluded that the population is a fraction of where are we at now, supposedly 7 billion people. And they're saying, no, based on their calculations of what I just explained, it's a fraction. And that really kind of makes you have to wonder about why the untruths as a descriptive. Back in the 1700s, there was a gentleman, I forget his name, who came up with this overpopulation theory, and saying that, the world will not be able to sustain itself and all this other nonsense. And it's been incorporated more and more into societies everywhere of this alleged overpopulation and not being able to feed everybody and everything else, that people just assume that it's fact. But as I said, these people have taken the time to sit down and do calculations and saying, no, the world population is a fraction. Now, in my previous video, I did mention about, as a descriptive of the elites, ruling class, Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, having a role in all this, what's happening. Very interesting stuff. Again, look into it yourself and you're going to be amazed. And when you first start going down that particular rabbit hole, you're going to be going through all the different stages of new information. So now this is going to segue into truths, facts. And when you look into this, as I said, I can present stuff to you. I can put it right here beside me on the screen. And the debunkers are going to be there. People are going to be, people debunk anything. The sky is blue, they're going to debunk it. So, and I also mentioned in a previous video about vetting information. And it was more, that particular video had to do more with the spiritual side of life as a descriptive. But I also stayed in there briefly that all information needs to be vetted, and that includes the earthly and everything, you know, in our daily lives. So at what point, or what would it take for someone to conclude that something that someone says is not an opinion, theory, or a belief? You have to ask yourself, you know, because if you start just, oh, everything's an opinion, well, that just makes everything wishy-washy, and then everyone is living their own reality, and we're all in the same reality. Yes, perceptions do vary, but don't confuse perceptions with what somebody states as a fact with calling it their opinion or theory or belief. And a lot of people, one of the biggest problems, and I've mentioned this before, is a lot of people share their theories and opinions and stuff, and it clouds the information pool. And for people who are looking for a fact or something, they have to filter out now through all this other nonsense. But people have been so accustomed that everything's a theory and opinion, they can't even distinguish what is a fact. So that's the word opinion, and then I threw in belief and theory and everything else in on that. The other word I would like to address is hearsay. And a lot of people have said, well, that's just hearsay. No. When somebody is sharing first-hand information, for example, through first-hand experience, it's not hearsay. Hearsay would be someone sharing what someone else said. Through that, it could get distorted, like with the telephone game of interpretation and everything else. So hearsay is another word that people just throw out there all the time. And the final phrase that people use is circumstantial evidence. People don't even have a clue what circumstantial evidence is. Anyone with working knowledge of law knows that everything, even before the courts, is circumstantial evidence. Now, just because someone, for example, a judge, allows the introduction of evidence, implying that it's not circumstantial evidence, doesn't mean that it has value or it doesn't. People rely on the fact, well, there's safeguards to and standards that need to be met for something to be deemed, for example, as hearsay or circumstantial evidence or an opinion. Yeah, there are kind of, but there's no magic that happens that automatically determines if something is fact or as a descriptive, umbrelling everything of personal fiction. People assume that, because the safeguards are circumvented every day for example, in the legal system. And a good example is the 7+ year nightmare that I lived through. And there's various reasons why they're circumvented, but all these safeguards of anything, and this is not just with law. I'm not picking on law. This is across the board with any profession. All these safeguards. Well, no, it's just it's more just to appease the people, to make them feel that yes, we have recourse. And when you actually look at people when they're having to deal with, say, a medical issue or something, and I did mention there was 3 people that I know that had gone through this, and injustice, they received injustice on their matters. It's just, yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors. Anyway, so the point, I guess, to this is people, and I'm generalizing here, tend to accept what any authority figure on any topic says is more than an opinion, more than hearsay, and more than circumstantial evidence. And that is through social conditioning. And for example, people say, well, do you have a PhD in this? No, you don't have a PhD in this. You don't need a PhD in this. But if somebody spends years, say, researching a specific topic, but they don't have any, they're not accredited with anything for their efforts, doesn't dismiss that they may not have in-depth knowledge of a particular topic, right? So there's a lot of social conditioning there. Now, a lot of people in the general population will impose on someone else, well, that's your opinion, that's your theory, that's your belief. Hearsay, that's circumstantial evidence. What it does is it brings that other person to their level. And now we're getting into everyone having the status of being equal. And we're not all equal. We're not all equal when it comes to, for example, critical thinking skills, having an extensive knowledge base, and being able to separate emotions when making conclusions. We're not all equal with our life experiences. And that can be divided up, just to expand very briefly, and I can go off really deep on this. People's personal opinions are based on biases, and then it goes off on that tangent. But there's also experiences that support, say, someone saying something, they have experience in that. And then people try to turn around and say, well, what you're saying is tainted because you've had, for example, this negative experience, and they dismiss it. And somebody that may have a negative experience may research a topic or just have that experience to rely on. But everyone is trying to equalize so everyone appears to be on the same level. And that's a big problem. So just to finish this up real quick, if people cannot recognize facts from people's personal fictions, opinions, theories, beliefs, what is circumstantial evidence and all this other stuff, then how is anyone supposed to learn? Then they become reliant only on themselves. And then that's part of the cycles of civilization, because it's reinventing the wheel. Each person's reinventing the wheel, and we end up with square wheels because, people are just relying on themselves. And how would somebody recognize when someone else comes along with more knowledge and understanding? Right? Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.